Okay, good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming. I am Matt Nelson, Superintendent of Schools for the Sanford School Department. I've done a lot of parent nights in my career, but this is my first sellout. We've sold the place out, and I kind of feel like the Rolling Stones, right? We sell out. I told that to my wife because tonight is our 24th wedding anniversary. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have a sellout performance tonight." And then we're also broadcasting live on YouTube. That didn't impress my wife, but that did impress my kids quite a bit, that we're broadcasting live on YouTube. But I appreciate everyone coming out. I appreciate everyone tuning in at home. This is a really challenging time. It's very stressful. It's very hard. Anytime we look at the opening of school, that is always something that is both exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking. This year is more different because we're going to be opening up school in a way that none of us have done before or none of us have envisioned. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our community for everyone's patience and their understanding and their support. Very appreciative and thankful that we passed our school budget recently. And we're at a point now where we're looking at feeling like we're all first-timers when it comes into being able to open school for that. What tonight is and what tonight isn't. I think people are going to be coming here tonight really looking for a plan and looking for answers. And we are probably not at that point right now. I don't want to disappoint anybody, but this is an opportunity for us to kind of share things that are under consideration, share some of our work that may help in terms of guiding answering some of your questions. It also may create some more questions. We do have up there, for those people who are watching at home, an email if people do have questions that they weren't able to be live in person, so that they can send those in at schoolinfo@sanford.org. And we've got Steve Bouchier is mining that tonight, so he'll be being able to take any questions that do come in for that. A big thanks to Steve. Also want to thank our curriculum director, Beth Lambert, Principal Matt Peterman, and our Performing Arts Center director, Brett Williams. One of the things I wanted to do with this event was, in some ways, this is a model of what we're going to have to do in all likelihood this fall. As I mentioned, it's going to be a different reopening than we've ever had before. So tonight is an opportunity for us to share information. Basically, that will probably hopefully help you in terms of answering questions that you may have. And as I said, it may generate other questions. Later in the presentation, I'm going to show the timeline that we've kind of got established here, just that can help people. I know that's hard for parents, especially because last spring was really challenging. It was challenging for everybody. I want to first thank our students. I do want to thank our parents and our families for all of everyone's efforts last spring. Thank our staff, our faculty, our teachers. And so that was super hard. And I realized as we come back, my children are older, but I have never forgotten where it comes into the opening of school, and especially in terms of trying to balance people's work lives and family lives. Those are really, really important, really hard decisions, and those can be stress, and we recognize that. And so we're not trying to put off decisions, but at the same time, we're doing our best to be thoughtful, to be measured. The information is coming fast and furious, and we're doing our best to try to be able to keep up with that for that. When we're looking at reopening our school, the goals that we have, we want to continue to operate a quality educational program. Our first priority is always to do that in a safe environment. Safe environment for our students and staff. I can't emphasize that enough. We're also following public health guidelines in Maine law. This is probably, at the end of the day, it'll be a superintendent's decision, obviously with school board approval. But at the end of the day, we are taking our work from public health guidelines and Maine law, the CDC and the Maine Department of Education. That's what we've done with this starting last spring, and we will continue to do that. We're also very understanding of families and their schedules and the impact that a reopening can have there. We also want to provide flexibility and choice. I think that's really important so that families can come back and make what they feel is the best decision that works for them, and be able to do that in a way that hopefully has options for that. And obviously, we have to make sure the protocols are in place for that. One of the things that we've developed in Sanford to help guide us, to guide our decision making, I call these our pillars for student success. These are what our school department is built on. We're not losing sight of those. Those are still very much at the forefront of what we're trying to do, of reopening school. Their student achievement, obviously we're here because we want our kids to learn. Climate and culture, that's the basis of our, all that we do. We want positive interactions, attitudes, and behaviors to also guide that. And at the end of the day, we also want to make sure that we're always improving and getting better. And that's to learn and to grow. And that's capacity building for that. When we met as a administrative team back at the end of June for our retreat, looking at the reopening of school, we really focused on these 6 priorities. We called them domains that we broke down things to basically look at. I just went over the pillars, and you know that all of these priorities can fall under at least one, if not more than one pillar. But we were really looking at the instructional piece. We were looking at how operations we're going to do, our facilities, student support, SEL, that stands for social and emotional learning. That's a big piece of what we do on a daily basis, but it's only taking on more of importance in what we've had to go through with COVID-19. And obviously technology is a big piece of what we're doing in terms of any reopening priorities. I put this together to kind of show the flow chart in terms of how we're looking at our decision making. The plan development is right in the middle. That's our 18 plus. Those are our administrative team, right in along with our central office team. Below them we've got some school-based leadership teams, district student services, health services teams, district operations and facilities teams, kind of feeding that information back and forth. And over to the right, you can see a lot of the other groups that are also important to help guide our decision making. Our parent-teacher organizations, associations, our teachers' union, public health consultants, public safety officials. They are also, you'll notice those arrows are going back and forth. And then up above is the school committee, where public input and final approval is going to be done in terms of what we've got for reopening plans. If you look at the timeline, this might help you better understand it a little bit. Back in June, we did close out 2019-2020 to reflect on last spring. We sent a survey out to families, our first survey that we sent out. We also sent a survey out to staff. We had a 2-day administrative team retreat to really focus at what we needed to do for the priorities. And then we also began our summer cleaning. This month in July, we call this early summer. There's a lot of moving that's going on in our district. in terms of we've got the Margaret Chase Smith construction project, and we've also got the converted middle school, Sanford Middle School project with that, so we've had to do some moving. One of the things we've worked on is establishing protocols. First ones that we came up with were those protocols for our faculty and staff to return to work. We're also working on a family's return to school plan. We did send out another family survey recently, and we're really looking at refining the options for our instructional settings. The piece that we call late summer, moving into August, the moving continues. I have a construction meeting tomorrow at Margaret Chase Smith School. All indications are at this time that we're on target to be moving in and to be reopening that school on schedule for when we do start up this fall. We do have a schedule that the converted middle school is going to also, the timeline that the contractors provided us is also shows getting us into the building in time to move in. That being said, there are some important deadlines that they have coming up. I do worry that we may not be able to meet that. We have a big construction meeting there tomorrow with our core building committee and a tour of the facility with the contractors, the architect, the Department of Education, so we can continue to make sure that that timeline is going to be met. It's our hope that we're going to be able to make a decision by the end of July, early August, in terms of being able to move our stuff. We don't want to move stuff and then find out that the building is not ready to open, because if we did, we'd have to also move the stuff back. So that's a little stressful right now, a little bit in holding. We also have got a lot of professional development in August focused on our teachers, especially to be able to help with delivering instruction during COVID. We're also reviewing the latest direction from the Center for Disease Control in the Maine Department of Education. I'll explain more of that a little bit. It's our hope in August to recommend a reopening plan to the school committee, and we're also at that time expecting staff to return in August. And then you'll see in September, first day of school, Tuesday, September 8th. That is a change to our school calendar that we're going to be recommending as part of our reopening plan. Right now, if we were to bring back people based on the governor's executive order, we would not be able to have groups over 50. And so we're looking at moving back out of August. We also feel like with all that we've got in front of us for the reopening of school, with all the protocols, the procedures, all the changes, we're going to need some time to put those into place to make sure that we are ready, whether that's professional time planning, professional development and planning time, but we've got to be able to do that. So it's our hope that by pushing the start of school back till after September 8th, that will work with the Department of Education. It's also in line with practically all of the schools in York County, and as well as most of the schools in Cumberland County. So I mentioned that the Department of Education is assisting districts in terms of returning to school. And so they're doing that. Those determinations are based on two factors. The first one is the Department of Health and Services and the Maine CDC have developed a system to categorize counties based on a holistic assessment of quantitative and qualitative information that includes recent data on case rates, positivity rates, and symptoms of COVID-19 data. And so that's basically a metric that they've done that will then come out and put a county into one of three categories. And it's kind of set up in a way of like a stoplight. Red would suggest that the county has a high risk of COVID-19 spread, And with that, they'd recommend that in-person instruction should not be conducted. A categorization as yellow suggests that the county has an elevated risk of COVID-19 spread and that the hybrid instruction model should be adopted. And then there's the green category. That would suggest that the county has a relatively low COVID-19 risk and that in-person instruction can be adopted, although a school district may opt for a blended or a hybrid instruction if its buildings or readiness make adhering to the required health and safety measures for all schools a challenge. And so right now, the first of these will come out, are scheduled to come out this Friday, July 31st. And then after that, they will be updated every 2 weeks. So that's the first thing that the DOE is going to be recommending, is based on a category that York County would fall into. The second piece that is going to base reopening decisions that the Department of Education is going to assist districts is whether or not a school department has the capacity for implementing the following health and safety requirements. And this is not just for us to be in green, but it would be for all of our different categories. And the first one is symptom screening before coming to school. The second one would be physical distancing in facilities. The third one would be face covering and masks. Then there's hand hygiene, personal protective equipment, and a return to school after illness. The Maine Department of Education has a reopening plan that prioritizes as many students as possible to in-person learning safely. And that's the key word, safely. Following a set of health and safety requirements. So what's guiding this DOE recommendation is best practices developed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and other states and what they've done. Because COVID-19 is a novel disease, scientific literature is growing rapidly with new information emerging almost every day. So guidance continues to evolve as the science develops. The official minimal standards for schools are going to be included as part of the DOE's framework for returning to classroom instruction. I want to point out, we see the list here of 6, that no single one of these, no single action or set of actions will completely eliminate the risk of COVID-19 transmission. But taken together, these health and safety requirements can greatly reduce the risk. I also want to point out that we have a contract for our school nurses to work with York Hospital. And so I'm in communication with York Hospital frequently. As you know, as you follow, probably throughout the state, there's anywhere from 10 to 40 new cases a day. Unfortunately, there are occasional deaths. In terms of in York Hospital, for every 100 tests that they do, that they put forward, there's a less than 1% positive rate. And so for us in York County and in Sanford, there is little community spread. That spread happens when people are in relatively close proximity. It's through respiratory droplets generated through coughing, sneezing, or talking with an infected person. So among the most effective preventative measures, when used consistently and in combination, are what you see up here on the screen. And also, what the DOE is saying is that best current evidence suggests that children, particularly younger children, are less likely than adults to be infected with COVID-19. So in general, rates of COVID-19 infection are lower for children than for adults. With that, 5.2% of all cases in the United States through May 30th were people under 20 years old. Furthermore, infected children may be less likely to transmit COVID-19 to others. The ability to transmit the virus appears to increase as children age. This fact may partially explain why to date schools do not appear to have played a major role in COVID-19 transmission. So helping inform the state of Maine and the Maine Department of Education's guidance is the experience of other countries, other states, where schools are already open or where schools and daycares never closed. So for instance, in such countries as Denmark, the Netherlands, Finland, Belgium, Austria, the pandemic has continued to subside even as schools reopen this spring. And so in the DOE's viewpoint, the evidence supports a safe in-person return to school if the health and safety protocols are followed. So what does that mean? Some universal safety precautions. As I mentioned, the DOE and the CDC require all staff and students to do a daily self-check before coming to school or getting on a bus. That includes, do I feel unwell today? Do I have a cough or sore throat? Do I have a fever? Do I feel feverish? Do I have a loss of taste or smell? Do I have a shortness of breath? Have I been around anyone exhibiting these symptoms within the past 14 days? And have I been living with anyone who is sick or quarantined? And these self-checks are also, as more information is becoming available, those are also changing, and that list is being added too. The next one is physical distancing. So our plan is built on adults must maintain 6 feet of distance from others to the extent possible. Maintaining 3 feet of distance is acceptable between and among students when combined with the other measures outlined in this list of safety requirements. 6 feet of physical distancing is required for students while eating, as students are unable to wear masks at that time. We'll need a medical isolation room to be designated for students or staff who exhibit symptoms during the school day. And we are evaluating our existing ventilation capabilities to ensure that they're maximizing their current capacity. Adequate ventilation is required for classrooms, with school departments having flexibility in implementation such as using properly working ventilation systems or outdoor air exchange using fans and open windows or doors. And also, as far as physical distance goes, groups in any one area, room, or classroom must not exceed what the executive order for the governor has for gathering size limits. Face coverings. Adults, including educators and staff, are required to wear a mask or face covering. Students aged 2 and above are required to wear a mask face covering that covers their nose and mouth. Masks and face coverings must be worn by all students on the bus. Face shields may be an alternative for those students with medical, behavioral, or other challenges who are unable to wear masks or face coverings, and that same applies to staff with medical or other health reasons for being unable to wear face coverings, and face shields worn in place of a face covering must extend below the chin and back to the ears. Hand hygiene. All students and staff in a school must receive training in proper hand hygiene. All students and staff must wash hands or use sanitizing gel when they enter school, before and after eating, before and after putting on or taking off their face mask, after using the restroom, before and after recess and use of playgrounds and shared equipment, and once again, upon entering and exiting a school bus. PPE, personal protective equipment. So additional safety precautions are required for our school nurses and any staff supporting students in close proximity when distance is not possible or when students require physical assistance. And at a minimum, these need to be these require eye protection and a mask or face covering. And also, classrooms in areas that have been used by an individual diagnosed with COVID-19 must be closed off until a thorough cleaning and sanitation can take place. That leads us to returning to school after illness. Six students or staff must use home isolation until they meet criteria for returning to school. This is ever changing. The CDC has updated as of July 20th recommendations for discontinuing home isolation as follows. So persons with COVID-19 who have symptoms and were directed to care for themselves at home may discontinue isolation under the following conditions. At least 10 days have passed since the symptom onset. At least 24 hours have passed since resolution of fever without the use of fever-reducing medications, and other symptoms have improved. You'll see at the bottom in purple, additional guidance on return to school after illness is forthcoming from the Department of Education, the Maine CDC. That's a big question that many people have, is what happens if someone tests positive? And so we're all anxiously awaiting what that guidance is going to be. Regarding food service, that includes increasing the frequency of cleaning, improving the ventilation through the increased running of exhaust fans, reducing the number of students in the cafeteria by using alternate spaces, minimizing the handling of cash, debit cards, mobile devices whenever possible, eliminating all self-serve options, including salad bars, milk coolers, and extras, serve individually packaged meals and dining utensils to students in a grab-and-go format, and use disposable food service items, and if they're not feasible, then make sure that all items are handled with gloves and washed with dish soap and hot water or in a dishwasher. Transportation. We're encouraging families to drop off and pick up their child or their children at school if possible, so that can help us reduce the number of students on the bus. We'll assign students to consistent seats. We will require face coverings on drivers and monitors. We'll also require face coverings on students while riding the bus. We'll require students to sanitize their hands upon entering the bus, open windows when the weather allows, and obviously cleaning of the buses to industry standards for COVID-19 afterwards. So that kind of leads us through what we're looking at right now that guidance has been provided to us. That leads us to the instructional plans. And so we saw this earlier. This was the categories that the DOE could have in terms of counties. The red, yellow, and green model. So what does that mean? We're trying to provide options and flexibility for families and choice. The first one is, unfortunately, if it's red, and we kind of lighten that red because it was hard to read, and this, please see the word on the left. This is draft, okay? We're still working through this, but this is what we wanted to be able to share of what are guiding our thoughts right now. So we got our feedback last spring in terms of remote distance learning. I was proud of, as I mentioned, of our students and our staff and our families, but I'm not sure that was true distance learning. That was a more emergency distance learning that we had to. Distance learning is nothing that any of us as educators signed up for. So it's incredibly challenging, but if we're red, all staff will teach and support students remotely unless their specific needs require it to be in person. We will expect all students to attend remote learning daily. Our grades pre-K through 4 will be provided a daily schedule to use that will include online instruction and independent learning. Students will be expected to complete 2 to 3 hours of learning each day. For the red model in grades 5 through 12, they'll follow their normal school schedule from 7:50 to 2:20, which will include daily instruction and independent learning. We're going to try to break up those instructional blocks so that it's no more than 20 or 30 minutes of direct instruction, where the remainder of class time can be used to practice new learning and receive help. Understanding that some classes may be required to complete work outside of the scheduled day. Those would probably be for our AP and our honor courses. We will be taking attendance daily. So that'll be done in grades pre-K through 4 during scheduled check-ins. 5 through 8, it'll be taken at the beginning of each block based on a student's schedule. In grades 9 through 12, attendance will be taken at the beginning of each block, and our grading will follow normal grading expectations. Right now, that is what we're looking at putting forth. That will be information that we have to share, obviously, with our educators and our teachers for input, but we are trying to raise up what the expectations are around the distance learning, both around attendance, around grading, and around expectations. If we're going to be in the yellow, that's kind of the hybrid between in-person learning and distance learning. You'll hear it referred to sometimes as blended learning. So our draft right now for that, what we're looking at is we're going to try to get our students in grades pre-K through grade 4, our special education students with IEPs, and our career and technical education students at SRTC back to school 5 days a week, following the safety guidelines. That's what we're looking at right now in terms of, and remember I said safety guidelines. So what that means is we look at that we feel that we do have the space. Remember, it will take out those students who are not comfortable returning to school and who want a pure distance learning model. So we're looking at trying to create in all of our elementary schools, we've been through, and we feel like by using the safety guidelines, trying to get 6 feet, minimum of 3 feet, it is our hope that we can bring back all of our pre-K through grade 4. Our CTE programs, the majority of them have large spaces that are going to have to change how things are done, but the space is there. We also feel like career and technical education, the nature of that education is such that it's very hands-on. In-person learning works best. And then I also mentioned we've got students' IEPs that we're by law required to be able to follow. For students in grades 5 through 12, we're looking at students will be divided into 2 large groups. There'll be a red group and a white group. We'll have red day students attend school physically in person on Monday and Thursdays. The white day group will attend school physically on Tuesday and Friday. Right now, we're looking at Wednesday being a full remote learning day for everyone, where students may receive individual small group support from their teacher. We'll also have a focus on one of our priorities is social emotional learning. Students could be assigned to recorded lectures, instructional videos, or other independent tasks to prepare for the in-person learning. And the in-person days will be spent working with teachers, practicing and applying learning. In this model, we're looking to take attendance every day. We're looking to have grading follow the normal grading and late work expectations. For those families who choose a fully remote learning option, families will be expected to help their child maintain attendance and engagement daily in the independent curriculum. More information will be forthcoming on that as we continue to be able to flush that out. As I mentioned, an online option will be offered to parents who choose remote learning. Monitoring support will be provided. Right now, we're looking at that by a member of the school department. And it's important to know that students will only be allowed to rejoin school physically at the end of a marking period. So we can't have students who will be jumping in and out. If you are, as a blended learner, and you want to go full distance learning, that's fine. But if you start distance learning and want to come back on a blended learning model, we'll have to be able, there's a lot of organization and coordination that goes with that, and that'll be done at a marking period. Green would be a full return. And our draft that we have with that would be bringing back all students pre-K to grade 12, 5 days a week. We'd have to be able to do that to make sure that we can not only have the green designation, but we can also follow the guidelines from the DOE and the CDC and do that safely. We'll have attendance, grading, and late work expectations following our normal expectations as outlined in our grade level expectations or handbooks. For those parents who still choose a fully remote learning option, they'll be expected to help their child maintain attendance and engagement daily in the independent curriculum. Once again, more information coming on that, as well as the online option and monitoring support by a member of the school department. And as I mentioned, students will only be allowed to rejoin physically at the end of a marking period coming from remote with that. As I said, these are drafts. These are things that we're working on now. I think it's important to realize that we have those safety guidelines that have been developed by the Department of Education. And right now, there is some funding that can come along from the DOE, but what we have to do is make sure that we are agreeing that we're going to follow all of those safety guidelines. And so that's going to be really important, where there'll be funds for us to come in to be able to allow us to purchase PPE, purchase hand hygiene, that will help us with the physical distancing. Those are things that are going to come back that we can be able to help. And we're in the process right now of putting those applications together, but we're also already receiving PPE. We're already receiving face coverings for those. So listen to, face coverings and masks, that can be very controversial. And one thing that's part of that is that's a requirement. So that's a requirement that needs to be enforced. That's something that's in play, that there's a statute in place as a superintendent, that if we have people who are not going to be following that guideline, then they're not going to be able to have in-person learning. That sounds harsh, okay? We're also in the process of understanding it's not easy all the time to wear these. So we're going to have to build in breaks, opportunities for students to be able to not have to have these on all the time. I realize that is sometimes for some people controversial. Please understand where it's coming in terms of what the Department of Education is looking at. That's an overview of what we're at. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's a very fluid situation. We're continuing to be able to get feedback. We're going to put together a frequently asked questions document based on information that will come out of tonight, as well as other people who are emailing any questions to the schoolinfo@sanford.org. So I think the goal would be to open it up for questions that people may have based on the information that we have presented tonight, realizing that that's overview. It doesn't really get too far down into the weeds. And that's work that if we may not have answers tonight, we'll be able to do our best to be able to work on those for it. So if anyone has an opportunity that they'd like a question to ask, please raise your hand. Why don't you head right up to be able to do that, and we will do our best to.
Thank you. I'm Michael Kleinrock, Springvale resident, parent of 2 children, one going into 1st grade, going into 8th. I'm also a health policy researcher, published 2 COVID reports. I live in your community, an expert on the spread of COVID and the information that we're talking about. I have a 17-part question I'm not going to punish you with. I was very intrigued by your plan to involve different experts and members of the community. Sign me up.
Yep.
Secondly, I see the information basing for the scenarios is going to be updated every 2 weeks. Currently, we have 5 to 13 times more cases than are currently reported. The chance for reopening to trigger radical shifts in the number of community-transmitted cases is huge. The selection of some countries around the world as evidence for the low risk of reopening schools is massive cherry picking. There are equally dangerous examples of reopening having been the key contributor to the rise of community transmission. This is more of a statement, I realize, rather than a question.
Yep.
But as a parent, I'm really struggling to figure out how you're going to make a responsible decision with the information you presented today, considering the information you're going to be faced with. And if the information you decide on changes every 2 weeks, does that mean that school's going to open in a hybrid model and then close again? How often will you make that decision, and how will you involve others in it? And again, the chance to be involved in this is a great opportunity. I laud you for taking the chance to take the hit, because I think we've all come here tonight loaded up.
Yeah.
So I know we're all very concerned for the health and well-being of our students. I want to leave you with one question, and it's from my 13-year-old. When you make the wrong decision about reopening, which he considers to be anything other than fully remote because he's paying attention and he's one of your students, so he's smart, how are you going to rebuild his trust that you need in order to have him cooperate with teaching for the rest of his school career?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mike. And yeah, I received your email. I think as a resource, it's great to have someone with your expertise and connection to that. I'll start before I address your child's question, is I also think I'm looking forward to see what we get for a red, yellow, or green designation. But I also think it's important for us to be able to know as families what the options are out there and what we may be able to do in the event that we have to respond to data or respond to information. So I think you're going to see there's probably a really good chance that we do start in yellow if we're given a green option, because of that may be for us something that allows families to better to be able to plan for, so that if we do have to pivot, it won't be such a massive pivot going from a green to a red, for example, or green going to yellow. So those are some of the factors that we're going to be looking at, that we have to be able to look at it. Mike, you hit a big point in terms of whether it's everyone in this room, everyone in our community, all of our stakeholders. You mentioned the word trust, and that's going to have to be something that at the end of the day, what we are doing is we're taking the information, we're presenting that out there. Please understand that I also want to make sure that families have opportunities and they have choice to be able to make sure that there's something that works for them and is something that they're comfortable with. That at the end of the day is something that I as superintendent have to go with the understanding that there's no perfect plan out there or perfect model that we have. I do also feel that it's important for, if possible, and I mentioned the word safely, if our students can be in school in in-person learning, I think that is, there's tremendous benefits to that. I think what you've seen throughout is if we have to err on the different information that we have, we'll be looking at guidance from the people that have provided that guidance, so that it can't be something back where, for example, it's like me making a decision in February to cancel school or not. At the end of the day, that rests with me in the decision. I have a process. It's not random. I come back and I do all of the things that I can be able to come back and check with that. But I've also come to terms that there's no guarantees with that either in terms of that. And so I think we're going to look at the information and do the best that we can for that. And with the understanding that it is fluid. And we're going to have to be able to come back and look at that, so that if we're in a situation where we start out and there are problems or issues, we have to be able to quickly be able to pivot to that. And that could be going right to a red designation and going right to a distance learning model with it. Anybody else? Middle, right there. Yep.
So, sir, my name is Ed Cormier. A lot of what we had tonight was focused on the children's safety and how the transmission is low in children. My question is more toward the staff, who are in those risk categories. I work for an employer. We're in phase 1. Don't see phase 4 anytime in the near future, so we're not going back. How are we going to keep the staff safe? And if a staff does go down and they're out, do all the kids in that classroom end up in an online version now? How are substitutes going to work? And then for the busing, we don't own the bus drivers. They're part of Ledgmere, another contracted company, and the bus drivers are consistent until they're not, and then it's another bus driver. What are the safety protocols we have in place with the bus company to make sure that everything we're doing that's changing on an up-to-minute basis, that they're getting that information?
Yep. So I'll start with the busing and transportation. Thanks, Ed. That's one where even though that we don't own our buses, we do have a very close working relationship with our contract with Ledgmere. That's not something that, as we sit back and we just say, oh, busing, that's not our deal. It very much is our deal. And so that's something that we are having conversations and communication with ongoing to be able to share the information that's coming back. We're expecting to have information coming from the Department of Education more around busing in terms of what you may be able to have for a number of people on the bus. With that, you saw some of the things that we did share that is going on with them. So I think that's a huge piece. You mentioned, obviously, many people have an interest focus from students. We're very student-focused and student-centered. But you bring up a very good point about our faculty and our staff. And so, as you saw with that, I have sent out a correspondence with them that shows what our return to work guidelines are going to be and our expectations. Those weren't something that were developed by Matt Nelson. They were also developed more from almost a statewide perspective in terms of school departments working together, looking at making sure that those were, obviously there's some things that have to be Sanford specific, but the general that we're coming back from is a place where everyone can come from. And we've also put forward, there are laws and things in place that allow people to be able to not come back to work. Those that are COVID related, that's everything that could be from childcare to their own personal health condition or someone that they take care of. So that information has been shared, and that's information where dialogue's ongoing. I'm meeting with our union representatives frequently, almost we're at a point where weekly, if not more than once a week, as we can share the information that's coming back and forth. I do worry in terms of if we do have someone that has to go into quarantine or someone that is not going to be able to work anymore. I am worried about substitutes. I worried about substitutes last year at this time when we weren't even thinking of COVID-19. So if you add that layer into it, those are some things that we're going to have to be able to do our best to work on to see what we can be able to do to come back and still make that a quality learning experience. Whether that means shutting something down or going to a distance learning for that particular option, all options would be on the table that we'd have to be able to do our best to kind of consider what would be the best option with what we've got for our resources to be able to come back and do that. And obviously, that's less than ideal. I recognize that for it. Next. Yep. I'll take a question from the viewers at home. Got quite a few questions over here. I thought we were just getting one. What about sports? Why you're making your way up? Right now with sports, no decision has been made on sports. We're working closely with our athletic directors in York County, athletic directors in Cumberland County. What you had was the Maine Principals Association rolled out a 4-phase plan. We chose in York County and Cumberland County not to participate in that, the first couple phases of that. The decision has been made recently that instead of preseason starting in the middle of August, they have now moved preseason back to the beginning of school, which will be September 8th, with the idea that they're, at this time, still subject to change, that the season would then start 2 weeks after that. There's talk of also having some conditioning prior to September 8th. That would be looking at August 24th. And we had made the decision that we were going to have whether or not there'd be conditioning allowed beginning on August 4th. So right now, the decision that York County and Cumberland County are in the process of making is, will that continue to be an August 4th start for conditioning date, or will we move that back to August 24th? Obviously for us, we're very much understand whether it's school activities or sports. We understand the important role that they play in our educational experience, but at the same time, our goal would be the reopening of schools safely, and we'd want to make sure that that is the priority, and we want to make sure that if there are going to be something where it's sports or activities, that those can be done with guidelines and protocols and procedures and can be done safely. So.
Move that down. Can you hear me?
I can there. Yeah, that was better.
Hi. It's kind of a question, but also I've spoken to the CDC for the state of Maine. Have you made arrangements for children or staff with periodic fever syndrome or other medical issues that mimic the coronavirus symptoms?
No.
Can you please, because I know that my child is not the only one.
Yep. I know that one of the things that the Department of Education has done throughout this process is they put together a task force made up of school nurses, and they're working on information with that. So that's something that may have already come up. I'm not aware of it, but at the end of it, obviously it's important, and we can be able to look at what we can do to help with your child be safe and to be able to see what that's going to be for it. Yep. How does the administration expect to enforce, well, how will masks be enforced? Those are protocols and procedures that we're working on right now with our administrative team in terms of, and I think a big part of that is obviously getting the word out, getting our expectations out ahead of time, being able to make sure those are in place and those are modeled so that we can be able to help with that enforcement.
Hi, I have two questions. Is the Bridge program going to continue this year? Because online did not work last for the thing. So if it is, even if it is hybrid, would they still be able to go to class to get their education?
Yeah, right now with the Bridge, we are looking at that program. If we were in a hybrid option, that they could be in school 5 days a week because of the space. We've been over there being able to look at the space that we feel like we can be able to make sure all of those guidelines that we put into place could be implemented based on the number of students we have and the different space. It might have to change some of the protocols and the procedures that they're able to do, but they're confident that they can pull that off. So the expectation right now is those students will be coming back.
Okay,
Every
awesome.
day. Yep.
Second question is, I work at CJL with K and first graders, and the students I work with really don't probably can't keep the masks on, and they don't really understand. Would you be providing like face shields for the staff in the room? Because masks will get pulled and shields might help better protect?
Yeah, as I said, there's going to be some protocols that we have in place for those that have been established that we will follow. And we, in terms of what we've got for inventory or what we've ordered, we do have those for situations that we'd be able to call up if that's going to be able to help us be able to make that work. Yep, right there. Question is, if someone tests positive, will parents be notified? And as you saw with that, in terms of what the protocols are, in terms of that exact procedures in those, we're hoping to get a flow chart to be able to allow us to show what that would be able to be. Obviously, there's confidentiality there that we also have to be able to make sure that we're protecting and walking in terms of how that communication would go and what it would look like.
So I've got a couple things as well. This is Melissa from the PTA. One would be just wearing masks all day if there's a way that we can spread the desks out, so as long as they're in, something like that to consider. The other thing would be, are we rolling anything out to help get volunteers or substitute teachers that may be willing, where there is a risk of, a teacher being out or more teachers being out multiple times throughout the year? Are you doing something to get more volunteers and or more substitute teachers on board? And then one other thing is just partnering with local daycares or something like that for the off days of students if we're in a hybrid model.
Yep. Thank you, Melissa. A couple things with that. I lost my train of thought there, but in terms of volunteers, we're not going to be allowing volunteers or people coming into the classroom, but we are going to be allowing substitutes who have to go through the protocols and the procedures and the training so that they can be able to come back and get cleared to be able to do that. But as part of our return, we're very much going to be limiting outside people coming into our building, okay? Substitutes, there would be a pool that people go into with the criteria and the training and everything that has to happen to make sure that we're comfortable with that level. In terms of daycare, one of the things that we're looking at as an option is we do have Lafayette School as an open facility right now. And so I have reached out to our recreation department, and they could have some interest in being able to provide, using the Lafayette facility, a daycare option, following all the guidelines that we still have in place. And we've also reached out to the YMCA. They've had practice, just like the rec department has this summer, in terms of doing their programs. And so in hopes that if they needed to, we have a space, they could provide the capacity to be able to come back and do that. Obviously, that would be at a cost to families, but our hope would be that it would be it would be reasonable and affordable for that. Now, the other thing I've got a question too, that is what we're trying to do is, if we're in a blended learning model and there's an A day and a B day, what we'd want to be able to do is we've asked, give the opportunity for families would all be on the same day. Okay, so if you had different grades or different students, families would be on the same day. And we've also allowing families to let us know 2 other families that they'd like to line up with, that it may assist and help them out in terms of a blended learning model, in terms of childcare or in that. And so our hope is, by giving some of those options for families in those situations, that will be better. And remember, we're hoping to bring back all of our K through 4 students safely in a way, because of, obviously you mentioned one of the priorities we had earlier was helping out families and looking at it in terms of where that case is. All right, other question, anybody else? Yep.
Hello, Jen Dudley. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for this presentation and for the really strong options that you're giving families. That really puts me a lot at ease, knowing that there's going to be some options. One of the things that you had put up there was the independent curriculum with more information to follow. Just for a little bit of clarification, is that looking more like a like completely independent of the classroom, or more like kids videoing in for the class?
We're still exploring. What we're made aware of, that the Department of Education is working on a curriculum right now for grade levels, by grade level, that be able to help in a distance learning option. Okay. And so that wouldn't be something like you would be going to a charter school. It wouldn't be something like you'd be doing homeschooling. But that's something that information's not going to be released until August.
Okay.
Okay, so we're still looking, trying to keep our options open. That's where it becomes, you notice one of the slides I had up there was a puzzle. Yeah. And so putting some of the pieces together to see who's doing what option and who's available to do that becomes really challenging.
And then I just wanted to clarify, you said something about vocational students. In the yellow model, would vocational students be here full-time if possible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yep, go ahead. As you're coming up, well, you're right there, so I'll wait.
Thank you. I'm Jen Davey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And
I have all your questions here, too. I was going to get to those. Yeah.
I have, I emailed them ahead of time. Actually,
Yeah.
a lot of them have been answered, but I just wanted to echo what Jen said. I too appreciate the options. I have 4 learners, all very different. And so it's not going to be boxed like all the Davey kids are doing this. They're all going to be taken into consideration into what their needs are. But I didn't really understand your answer to Jen's question, which was my question, about the independent curriculum. So will they have a teacher earmarked for, like, so for example, one of my kids I'm considering full distance learning for. Would she be placed into a full distance learning classroom, and then there would be a Sanford faculty member assigned to that class, and they would operate with that faculty member? Or would it be, I would be her faculty member, you would be providing me the curriculum?
Maybe. Okay, and so let me start by, I'll try to get there, okay? But right now, as families, okay, one of the questions I got was, hey, if we have a number of students who just choose to do the distance learning because it works best for them and they're not comfortable coming back, is that going to impact our school department? Is that going to impact our funding, for example? And in a situation like that, if someone was distance learning, no, it would not, okay? If someone made the decision to say, I am just going to go back and homeschool my student, and I'm going to do it on my own, and they would withdraw from the Sanford School Department, enroll as a homeschooled student, then yes, that would obviously have an impact on the Sanford School Department. Now, we have homeschool students. We had them last year, we had them the year before, and the year before, because for some families, that's an option that comes back and works best for them. One of the things that I'm hopeful for is, one thing that we've learned through this is, in education, there's other ways we can deliver education. And you mentioned it in your families. Some people react really well to a distance learning. So our hope is that when we get past all of this, we might have more of an option in terms of what that would look like, because we also may have faculty and staff who also could be able to work on that. And instead of going to a different charter school, for example, we could keep them in Sanford to be able to do that. I'm hesitant to answer your question, just like I was with Jess's, because we don't have that crystallized or finalized yet. That's something that we're working on to be able to see what that looks like, because I don't know what I've got for numbers yet, what I've got for options, and what be able to works best to be able to do that. And I know that stinks but
mean,
at the end,
yeah.
that's the reality that we're in, trying to be able to get these from draft form into more of, these are what we're going to be recommending.
Right, and to go along with the decision-making from Families for Distance Learning, will there be, like, definitive information put out about, like, the co-curriculars in schools? So, like, I'm specifically talking about my fourth grader. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, if you're not having lunch, if you're not having recess, if you're not having, singing time, if you're not having gym, if you're not having all of the things that, in my opinion, make up a fourth grade experience, and this particular child thrives in a distance learning format, then, okay, we're probably going to go that route, So when will that information be released so that families can really make like a well-informed decision about, the best fits?
Right, so I'll speak to the fourth grade experience. One of the things that we're trying to do in this model, and that's why when you look at, for us being able to bring back pre-K through grade 4 every day, we can contain those students, okay? So it may not be a situation where they're all going to be at lunch together with all of their other fourth grade students. It could be by class. And so would they still have physical education class? Yes, especially early on when we can get outside. That's very helpful. Would it impact what type of activities they're doing? Absolutely. Would we be able to still have some of those allied art classes that you talked about? Yes. What I envision would be instead of them leaving to go to the teacher's room that teaches that class, that teacher might come to their room so that we can keep them into that space.
Okay.
You mentioned music. That's one right now where the recommendation as part of the reopening guidelines from the Department of Education is suspend all music, singing, and playing of music activities, just based on that is a higher probability, I think, and these are my words, so they may be wrong, I may be saying it wrong, but that's a higher probability in terms of that particular activity to say no to. So will there be lunch? Yeah, but you saw what it would probably be. We can't have everybody in the lunchroom, and there's probably going to be trying to contain people to be able to do that. Will they still have some of those experiences? Yes. Will it be the same if we were all in school? I can't promise on that. And that's what's hard here is the last thing I want to do is say something that I can't be able to deliver on.
Yeah,
and
no,
so when we start looking at what that curriculum is going to be for the online option, I'm hesitant to be able to go there because I don't have a great feel on exactly what that's going to look like yet with that.
That brings me to the OWL question that I had sent to you, or technology piece. Is that being considered
Yes.
right now in like the funds that school districts are receiving? So where is Sanford in the technology piece of exploration for distance style learning?
Yeah, so that is something that we've discussed. That is something that I think we could have funding for, but I'm going to stop short because it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to make sure our teachers have been properly trained in it and are comfortable enough to be able to come back and be able to do that. Could I see some situations where that is coming back and working? Absolutely. Do I see it where I can stand in front of you and say universally that's what we're going to come back and be able to do that and do that by September 8th? No, I'm not comfortable saying that. But I also think that we're working on being able to try to purchase those things that are going to help with that distance experience from what is going on in the classroom to be able to transferring that over to the people who are not in the classroom.
Okay, and then for my junior high, if you're in the hybrid and you're on the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, so when you're in class, you're obviously in class. When you're at home, do you still have the same teacher for that? Like, so does the teacher, I guess, so will they be teaching the same material on Monday and Tuesday and then the same material on Thursday and Friday, and they'll just be reinforcing
I
So
think
when you're
what
at
you're, yeah,
home,
one of the things we envision, Jen, is more of a flipped classroom model where some of that could be, the teaching is done, people work on it, this could be done as they're working at it at home, then when they come back, that's when the teacher might be able to come back and work with them individually or in small groups to be able to help with the stuff that was also delivered to them with it. And yeah, so I do see a lot of that kind of keeping the same. I don't see one group getting ahead of the other group.
Okay.
I see that trying. Now, that being said, it's also not, there could be some things where remediation or acceleration could still happen within those two particular groups, on the two different days. But I think what you'd see for the most part is it's going to be somewhat
Right. And it's
consistent, similar.
it's a lot of questions because it's just bananas, you know? So it's like you're trying to decide, like, you know, as parents, like, how much, if you're working, how much time do I have to do the distance learning and the support and this, that, and the other? I'm not a proponent or advocate for any plan. I'm go with the flow, do what's right for you, man. But I'm like, without, you know, I appreciate this information being phase one, but I am anxious that, like, time is ticking. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's like, okay, you know, I have a spouse who's working full-time from home. I'm going back to work at the end of August. You know, what can we realistically do to support our students? And we can't, like, make that decision, and I understand why. Because we don't know, you know, we don't have the information. And so is it fair to assume, based on the slides that you shared, that we'll be able to, as families, start making those decisions by the second week in August?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have looked at is right now we have a school committee meeting scheduled for August 10th. And one of the things that the Department of Education is going to require is for us to have 3 plans: a distance, a blended, and an in-person plan. And so those would be the plan for us is to August 10th to be able to get that in front of our school committee for them to be able to take action on, realizing that whether or not what option we are being able to land on or choose could change even after August 10th based on the information that comes in, but at least we're going to have the framework for those 3 plans for people to understand that. I wanted to get things today, it's July 27th, but at least now I think people have a pretty good handle on what's blended looking like for our plan. Hey, right now, we're working hard to get all of our K through 4 kids back. We're trying to get all of our CTE kids back. If I have someone who's in the bridge program, or if I have someone who's, depending on their IEP, those are opportunities that we can help with. If I don't, are we looking at a blended option 5 through 12? And if so, is it a Monday, Thursday? And who do I need to get into my Monday, Thursday group to help us as a family if I'm working and my spouse is working? Those are some of the things that we're trying to get out there so people can at least have that information so that it doesn't feel like it's more of a blind side in terms of it. Does it still have to be flushed out? It does. And is it going to be being flushed out even beyond August 10th? I think we're all very realistic to understand that. But we've also got to make sure that what we've got is in place before students come in on September 8th.
Okay, thank you.
One of the questions we had will schools have additional nurses? Before I answer that, next, who wants to come back and speak? Ed, come back up. Well, hold on. Anybody else before Ed? You've already come up once. Yep, come on up. Sorry, Ed, I'll get to you. Will or schools have additional nurses? Right now, we're working hard to look at a contracted service for us to have CNAs also helping our nurses out in all of our schools. And so that's something that we're working hard to be able to have those funds that we were talking about coming back. We feel those would be COVID related. That would be very helpful so that we'll have a nurse and CNA in every building, every school. Some of you, for some of our smaller schools, you'll notice that we've moved our nurse's office because we have some priorities and things that we have to be able to come back to do that we weren't going to be able to do in that particular space for that. So, yep.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sear. I'm a social worker at the Willard School. I have a question as I'm thinking of my own special needs child who's going to be a freshman in high school. If it's going to turn some point to the blended model or the hybrid model, would it be possible for teachers to record their direct instruction time? Because if I'm at school doing my job and my son's home trying to do his independent job, which is a real struggle for him, if teachers were to record those direct instruction times, and when I get home from work, I can check and see how he's done. And I can go back into the lectures with him if he has questions, if I can't get the teacher, right on the phone or a quick email. It's just another sort of like other layer of support parents can get if they are working full-time during the day
Yep.
and their older child has to do some of that independent learning.
Yep.
Just a question, just an idea that other parents said, can you just ask that question? Because that would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
So-
And one of the things that we're trying to find that balance because our experience last spring was there was feedback for us to be able to come back and try to have an experience that was more synchronous to what was going on in the regular education so that my son wouldn't sleep till noon every day, okay? So we're trying to find the balance of that compared to the experience that you just talked about. And so for us, we're walking a fine line there of what our expectations are, but we're going to be, the plan is to develop a rubric that will allow us to be able to have situations like that so that that student isn't getting dinged on attendance or getting dinged on work completion or those types of things because of a home situation that they have for support. And so once again, we're trying to develop something there that's not going to penalize those kids in those particular situations, but we're also trying to maintain it over here so that people can come back to be able to say, wait a minute here. This is something that we want people to come back and get into that routine to be able to find that balance, to be able to do that around an expectations. I think for us, as I mentioned before, last spring, emergency distance learning. This learning, we're trying to raise up the expectation, the stakes. The balance we have to do is make sure that's not done for a student who's not able to be able to do that or whose family situation impacts. My belief and we'll work with a family in that particular case to be able to help with that situation. Ed.
All right, 2 questions wildly separated apart. First one is with lunches. We talked about doing grab-and-go meals. In the springtime, they were delivering lunches, so if we're in a full at-home model or in a hybrid, are they gonna be delivering lunches? And for the kids that are in school doing lunch, talked about, cash and credit and all that kind of stuff. Are we gonna move to a fully just, everybody gets a lunch model and not worry about the lunch tag system and all that?
I don't think so. We haven't talked about that one yet. I think if we were in a full distance learning, if we're in red, I think you can expect a similar to what we had done in last spring in terms of delivering of meals. If we're in a blended model, okay, I think it would be our intention to try to get people those meals to kids when they're not in school. How that's done, not sure yet. And what I mean by that is it may be one of those things where if my day is Monday and now all of a sudden I eat lunch on Monday, I may have something going home with me that's going to be Tuesday and Wednesday, as opposed to delivering that or to be able to do that. That might be the flexibility that's coming back, but yes, our intention would be to try to be able to make that happen in those situations.
Second question, so right now, everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, you said everybody has the right to pick a fully online learning status.
We're trying to do our best to give families, here's information, what works for you to give them that flexibility and choice.
So if the K-5 or K-4 teachers are going to be teaching 5 days a week in the classroom, are all the 100% online folks going to be put into one classroom? Because right now those teachers don't have time to go pee. How are they going to handle a classroom of 15,
Yep.
18 kids and Zoom all these other kids?
Yep, And so that's something, good question. That's something where we're trying to determine what we have for people coming back. And that may be something where, Ed, those people are put into more of the distance learners rather than to stay connected to Mr. Nelson's class. I may be now more in a distance learning class with someone else and that has a teacher too that's assigned primarily to that. Okay, so I don't think that, you're right, the expectation for our families to come back and say, hey, I've got my kids in front of me 5 days a week and I have to provide the distance learning. I don't see that as feasible. And so we're going to have to be able to work on what's that going to look like for the distance learning option people. Okay. Anybody? Mike, go ahead. You're hustling, so I'll let you go.
No, I'm just
Beat me to it.
respecting everybody's time. Thank you.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to be, rather than specific about some of the things in your way you're managing the teaching, because obviously people have had very different experiences. Some of the students have very different needs. One of my experiences as a parent is that we didn't have any chance to give any systematic feedback throughout the 3 months of the spring session. And I don't believe that that gives you or the teachers any chance to course correct as we go through this. So are you going to institute more frequent feedback sessions or some systematic process whereby we can figure out if this is working or not? Otherwise, we're going to feel isolated and not listened to, and you're not going to have a positive experience either.
Yep, no, once again, I want to be careful that I don't say something we can't deliver on. What that looks like in terms of feedback, I think it's going to be necessary to be able to help us, to be able to, rather than wait. I think we'll be better suited now, after going through last spring, to be able to come back and look at what we were doing. I think there has to be some mechanism for feedback to allow people to be able to share what's working, what may not be working, what are some of the things that we could come back and be able to tweak. What's hard is, it's hard for a model to be able to say what maybe works for you may not work over here, and what may not work over here. Last year, where we were in this area, a lot of it was starting with our own teachers and our own staff to be able to try to get that going with that. And so I think with a better handle on that, especially now as we're looking at a piece here that has some of this different options, it's not just red of what we have. I think we're going to want to have options for feedback. It may be as simple as the school info at Sanford, getting that out. It may be some surveys. I try to walk a fine line with people that I'm not bugging you all the time with the with this nice app that we have, but it could be as simple as just being able to send something out that could be a really brief survey that's going to help give us some quick information that we can distill down to be able to come back and help us with that. So ideally, yes. I also know there's a lot going on, so I want to be careful that I'm not writing a check I can't cash, but I think there's definitely a desire for us to be able to have opportunity for people to share feedback for us of how their experience is going with it. All right, I've got, people don't mind, I got some more questions I'll go through with our viewers at home with that. How are we expecting little ones like kindergartners to wear masks and properly socially distance? Yeah, that's going to be incredibly challenging. One of the things that we're also going to be talking about is we're going to be implementing by this model almost a 180-degree difference where where's one of the things that you learn in kindergarten? Sharing. We're really going to be discouraging sharing going on to be able to do that. So kindergarten at its best is always challenging. We feel that it is even more challenging through a distance learning situation with that. So yeah, it's going to have to come back to be able to do our best to work with them for that. Is it possible to organize classrooms by neighborhood so we could limit exposure on the bus during transportation and out of school for playgroups and childcare? I did mention the idea of trying to be able to share that in terms of information that people have that they can hook up with. In our last survey that we sent out, we were trying to really start to get a handle on, you may already know that your student is, or students, nope, we're not coming back. And so if that's the case, we know that helps us in terms of some of our planning. And the other area we were trying to get to was the bus, because we've got to try to figure out who's on the bus, who's not, how can we strategize that in a way to be able to help us in terms of the trips. We may have to take more trips than what we're used to. It may alter some of our start times, for example, but those are situations where we're trying to be as strategic as we can, but it starts with people letting us know if they're not. You saw in the transportation, one of the things we're encouraging, if at all possible, is if families could be able to get their children to school, that's going to be able to be a big help with that. We talked about SRTC, we talked about more nurses, we talked about shared materials being handled. If children go to school in the same building, they'll be on the same schedule. In terms of kids with asthma, do they have to wear masks all day long? There are those medical conditions that are acceptable for people to come back and be able to maybe, for example, wear an alternate or something that's going to be able to help with that situation. Students with pre-existing conditions are things that, just like if we're talking about our staff, they could be our most vulnerable. We're going to have to work with them to make sure that what we're doing here is not going to be able to jeopardize. Have we considered shorter days at the elementary level to help students and adjust to mask wearing? That is something that is a consideration. That is something right now the Department of Education is understanding with, and they've given us some flexibility with where that is. And so it's also one of those things that if we're going to keep people in almost the same class or the same pod, that's a long day for everybody. And then you also factor in the mask wearing, and so the face coverings. And so, yeah, that is something that we are looking at to try to be able to consider that, because the last thing we want to do is also by having this procedures in place that they can also come back and backfire on us. Has there been discussions about utilizing outdoor spaces and/or increasing time outdoors, especially for our young children? Yeah, that's one of the things that is a big emphasis, is if we can get outside, to try to get outside. Whether that's not only just in a recess situation, but it's also if there's ways that that can be done to get people outside, that's going to be helpful. Will the safety precautions be uniform across all Sanford schools? What I would say is the quick answer to that is yes. We'll definitely make sure that elementary schools are following procedures, that developmentally there may be some differences that go on to the middle or the high school level, but there's some of those that are non-negotiables in terms of what we're looking at as far as safety precautions going through all of our schools. Will our state and federal funding be impacted by students who unenroll? And the answer to that is yes. We are very much in conversations with the Department of Education pushing that because that's a worry that we all have. We all know how tight our budgets are. In Sanford, we're a high receiver. We pay a lot, we have a lot, we rely a lot on state subsidy. And so our budget passed on Tuesday, July 14th. It became official Wednesday morning, July 15th. And within minutes, we had a budget freeze. And I put that into place because I am just concerned that we have funds that are coming in that can be paid for, that can be COVID-19 related, but they can't supplant our budget. They can't they can't replace things that are in our budget with that. And so we know how the state of Maine's been impacted. We're all following along. My concern is that as we get our monthly payments, I'm getting really worried that next spring we might be in a situation where there's a payment that we're expecting that doesn't come. And so we're going to have to be very conservative and planful to be able to make sure that we would be prepared for that. I do worry about, as I mentioned, Those people who withdraw to be homeschooled, that is an impact to our funding. Those who are going to be still with us doing an online option, those are things that we would still be able to get that funding. How do we recommend teachers provide emotional care and/or first aid to a child in their classroom? In parentheses, hugs and high fives. Once again, a very part of what we do, that's going to be a different part of what we do now because of we're not going to be able to have those types of contacts with that. One of the things I did talk about was our goal with special education to try to have those students come back to be more in ways that we can fully support their IEP, which was very challenging to do last spring, in a full distance learning model with that. So, how are we doing, Mr. B? Do we have another layer coming in? All right, there you go. What about snow days? Ha! Someone's messing with me. All right, I like it. I don't know about snow days in terms of that. I think we would treat snow days like we normally would in terms of if it's not safe for us to transport kids to school, we won't do that. What about gym and recess? Those are going to be things that happen in terms of that. You notice that our guidelines for that would be hand washing has to happen before and after those events. So it's our hope that that won't mean that certainly some of those high areas in the playground would have to be some things that would have to be wiped down during the day, but the fact that we're going to be really hand washing would be able to help with that. Will students be provided with technology if in distance learning? Yes. Those are funds that we have coming back from COVID-19 that will allow us to make sure that we have the devices, but it will also allow us to make sure that we've got funds to help with internet connections for those families who that is challenging. Looking at band this year, right now, one of those items that we have, the latest information has something where band right now is looking at it being in a suspended. I know that the State of Maine Band Directors Association, they have not taken an official stance yet. I was told today that the University of New Hampshire canceled their marching band, so that may be something that would be forthcoming, but as of right now, no official decision with that. What's been or will be done to ensure teachers are trained to use technology engaged in online teaching? I talked about how we've got professional development that's ongoing this summer. Beth Lambert's put together an excellent program based on our experience last spring. And so our turnout and our participation, our feedback is better than it's ever been. I think it was one of those things, as much as we trained people in the past, there's probably a mindset to say, yeah, I'm not sure when I'll ever have to need that. Well, guess what? That time has come so that we have put together to be able to do that for it. Can parents say, no, our child is not going to school until COVID-19 is over, and can they do remote learning? Yes, that's part of the options and the flexibility that we want to give families. Will special education students be able to attend if York County is in the red zone? That one would be, the best I could probably answer that would be maybe. That would have to be something that, it would be hard, okay? But we'd want to look at all of those situations on an individual basis. Can we, social media from our school-owned technology, can we block social media from our school-owned technology? We can check into that. I don't want to answer that and not be able to deliver on something. How are we going to keep the building clean if it's open 5 days a week? Right now, we are working at expanding our custodial staff and hiring more people to be able to come back into, we've got our normal cleaning, what are the extra cleaning and what are the resources that are going to be needed? And so that's something where we're going to be hiring that. I also anticipate that there could be an option for part-time custodians working during the school day to help us with some of those highly frequent touch areas, to be able to make sure that we are on top of those. So be on the lookout for that. That might be a nice job for people who are looking to get involved, but also in a way that matches up with the school schedule of our children to be able to do that. So that's what I have for questions. Any last ones? Mike?
So just today on NPR, there was a podcast about 45 minutes on school reopening. It's the On Point podcast, if anyone wants to think about it. There was an expert interviewed about all of the things that schools should be preparing to do. It sounds like you've addressed many of them based on my listening of it, but I just wanted to share that with the rest of you parents and attendees, because I think that's really important. But really look forward to the chance to participate further and say again, if there's a way that we can be involved and people can volunteer, we don't want to be left out. Thank you.
Yep, no, thank you, Mike, and I'm not sure if that's ready for on demand yet to listen to, but I'll mark that. One thing to pay attention to would be, we do have we'll be putting together frequently asked questions where we can try to be our best to be succinctly answer these the way that we can. That will be ongoing as it comes in. We also do have on our webpage, when you go there, it directs you to either the COVID-19 resources page, or it goes to our inclusion and diversity page. That may be something that resources like that we can add in there to say, hey, this may be something that you can look at. It might be something that we can put through our app, trying to find that balance to get out for people to be able to do that. There's a lot of information. It's very fluid. It's changing. Typically, as I said, for Sanford, we're going to continue to follow the guidance of the Maine Department of Education, the Maine CDC. We'll do our best to be flushing out where these plans are and doing our best to try to communicate updates and information that comes. As I started, thank you. We understand that this is a very stressful time. It's a very difficult time for all of us and for families and for our children, for our students, and for our staff. I am very, one thing I do have is I have a belief in Sanford. I have a belief in Sanford, especially when times can be a little bit challenging. That's when I think we can be able to come back, knowing that it's uncharted waters, knowing that we're in areas that we've never been before. And so there's going to be situations where we may not have answers right off the bat, but please continue to have patience as we will be able to look for those, to do our best to try to find those answers. Please know at the end, overarching all of this, is you have that flexibility. You know your child best, you know your family in terms of what it is that you're going to be comfortable with, as we can share, because we want to do our best to deliver on what we can for the best education for all of our children to be able to do that. So we'll wrap up, we'll finish. I'll be here if people will maintain our 6-foot distance, but if there are people who want to talk to me offline, please do so. And if so, we do ask that as people exit, try to maintain the physical distancing to be able to be doing your best to be 6 feet away as you head out. But thank you, and stay tuned.